Good morning. The August 16th, 2022 meeting of the Charter Authorizing Panel is called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Department of Ed auditorium and ask that you please silence all electronic devices. My goal is to facilitate a fair and responsible hearing. I'll request that each person speaking please state your name clearly into the microphone, including your title for our record. I will ask that you continue to speak clearly into the microphone for the benefit of the panel, the audience, and the viewing audience. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and a transcript of the meeting will be posted on the DESE website. So good morning, everyone. And with that, we will begin with our consent agenda. Panel members, we have the minutes from July 19th, 2022. If you take a look at those, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Zellner and a second by Ms. Newton. Was that you?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Thank you. All right. As we begin our action agenda, Ms. James, if you will come up and go over the process for us, please.
My name is Whitney James. I'm a staff attorney with the department. First, the chair will swear in all parties speaking on behalf of the charter, and that is people speaking on behalf, not public comments. And then also parties speaking in opposition. We can do all of that at the same time. I believe we only have Mr. Hollowell. Then the charter applicant will have 20 minutes to present. The opposition will have 20 minutes to present following that. And then the applicant will have 5 minutes to respond to the opposition, and then we will hear public comments. But those are before discussion and questions from the panel. Those are not part of the discussion. So we'll just have 3 minutes for each public comment. I believe we only have one person signed up right now. And then following public comments, we'll go over the legal review, and then we'll be open for discussion and questions from the panel.
Thank you. Ms. Summons, if you will introduce our first action item.
Good morning, Dory Summons, the DESE Charter Office. We have representing Omni Classical Prep of Cabot. We have Monica Ramirez, who is the Omni Board President, and Missy Bosch, who is the Founder, Director of Omni Classical Prep of Cabot.
Thank you. All right. All those that will be speaking on behalf of Omni Classical Prep of Cabot, if you'll please stand and raise your right hand, and all those speaking in opposition. Where is our, there he is. Mr. Hollowell, if you will raise your right hand.
Yes, ma'am. It's blurred. But
I see you now. Thank you. All right. Let me get to my oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Bosch, will you be presenting first? Ms. Ramirez, you'll be presenting first. All right. If you'd like to come to the microphone, and we'll get your presentation up. You may want to kind of turn those microphones into you a little bit so we can hear you.
Very loud.
Yeah, that's good. We'll see how that works.
Good morning, distinguished panel and members of the Arkansas Department of Education. My name is Monica Ramirez, and I am the president of the Omni Academic Board. It is an honor and privilege to stand before you today. We want to thank you for your time and for allowing us to present our vision of Omni Classical Prep of Cabot. I also want to thank our team for all of their hard work over the last year and for their commitment to seeing this charter come to fruition despite the resistance that we have faced. Finally, I want to thank the community members for joining us this morning, those here to speak in opposition and in favor of the charter, as it shows that our democracy still works. Momentarily, Melissa Bosch, the future director of Omni Classical Prep of Cabot, will walk you through our vision and answer any questions that you may have. Melissa has a great love of education and believes that children from all socioeconomic backgrounds deserve an outstanding education, hence the determination to pursue a public charter. As a mother of 4, including a special needs daughter that requires full-time care and a son that is headed to the University of Arkansas School of Engineering on the Governor's Scholarship, Melissa has a full plate. I am beyond thankful that she loves the kids of our community to the extent that she does, because despite her busy schedule, she has worked tirelessly on this charter, curriculum development, and this slideshow. All of Melissa's efforts flow from her love of education, her expectation of excellence and transparency, and a desire to change our community for the better, not just today, but for generations to come. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce you now to Melissa Bosch, whose knowledge, expertise, and determination will be vital as we move forward with this charter.
All right, let me make sure I got this. Hello, I am Melissa Bosch. I go by Missy, and I'll be presenting our vision today. Thank you all for joining us today, and I want to thank the Department of Education group. They have worked tirelessly with me to try to get this perfect for you. And I want to thank our board, because while I'll introduce them later so you can kind of see our breadth of knowledge, we are very diverse in our knowledge of special needs kids. And so with that, there we go. So this is going to be our overview today. I'll talk about who we are, our mission and beliefs. I'll go over the governance, the waivers, all of the educational outline of what we're going to use with our K through 12. I'll talk about our budget, and then how we've received a license from Hillsdale College. Make sure I got the one. So my name is Melissa Bosch, as you all know, and I am a mother of 4 children. I have spent my entire life either working to get a good education or helping my children get a good education. My children are ages 21 through 12, and I was the original founder of Omni Academics. When we realized that I would need to remove myself from the board, which I reluctantly did because I really do have a very special needs child, we went ahead and appointed different members that would give us that expertise that I was taking away from the board. What you all don't know is that I really don't have to direct this, and I know a lot of people had come in opposition to that. We could put out, there's a lot of classical directors that have seen our webpage and asked to actually run the school, and I think they were looking for more of a private education, and not a lot of people want to dive into the academic side of the public charter education. And so when I was about 20 years old, I had joined the Air Force because I had spent my entire teenage years working full-time. My parents could not afford school, like the lunches, the sports, and anything that came along with it. So at 20, I joined the Air Force, and for my 9-year Air Force degree, or my tenure, I was selected to be part of the Airborne Communications program. And so I was trained, and I flew aboard the AWACS aircraft for 4 years, and within 2 years of being at Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma, they had promoted me to instructor, where they had me teach students in air. So we covered all of the safety protocols, and then also to make sure that cryptographic material was handled properly and all of that. I held a top secret SCI clearance for my entire career. But I had married my husband there and had our first daughter, and we kind of realized that after we were mentored by a commander that there's a whole other side of the Air Force that actually pays better than enlisted. And so we quickly gained our associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees while we were enlisted. And our goal was to go into the Medical Service Corps, and he applied first since we had 2 children at that time. That was where our careers changed. He got commissioned, and he went to North Dakota, but I had just been chosen to fly special air missions out of DC, to fly with senators, the vice president, even the president for the rest of my career. So they told me I needed temporary custody of our 2 children. So I turned down the assignment, and that's where I was thrusted into public education for my kids. After North Dakota, we went to Hawaii. And the year that we went there, the academics were 50th in the nation. And so we had a hard decision to make because our assignment was so late going there that we ended up having to live off base. And the off-base schools were so expensive if you used a private school, so we decided to homeschool. That is where I was introduced to classical education. Within 1 year, I was able to educate 3 of our children, all different academic needs, all different levels, and their annual testing scores were through the roof. And I was like, I didn't know what I was really doing. I just was following this model. And so I gained some friendships with locals, and we started the first classical conversations in Hawaii, which has now blossomed over all of the islands. So after we left Hawaii, we had, and I'll talk a little bit about it why, but after we left Hawaii, we went to Virginia, and that's where our daughter became sick. And I'll kind of discuss why classical model is so relevant within the education system. So I would like to introduce you to our board. We were founded, it was actually January of 2022, that's a misspell. And it was founded by local business owners, teachers, parents, and you will see many of us are veterans. We partnered to create the first open enrollment charter school in Lonoke County. Our initial goal was to increase literacy and math scores, but to be 100 inclusive for our special needs kids. The classical model was the only option that we realized we could use to envision this, and we are a nonprofit 501c3. And so as you have heard, Monica is our president. She is a mother of 4. Her oldest son attended ASMSA in Hot Springs and currently attends University of Arkansas with my son at the engineering college. She has a firsthand knowledge of the lacking intervention for dyslexia students. Her second son was late diagnosed in school, and so as I believe he's going to be a sophomore or a junior, he is well behind his peers. Megan Hayes, who is also here, she was born and raised in Cabot and is married to a Purple Heart veteran. They have 3 children as well, and she was one of the first parents that recognized that we had no other options in Cabot when, out of the blue, the last day before school, our school decided, it was in last year's school system, that they just chose to mask our kids even though the governor had repealed the emergency action order. She holds a bachelor's degree from Harding University, and she and her husband are the owners of Zella's trash service in Lonoke, which was disclosed on our paperwork. April Ferrier is our secretary, and she is currently traveling with her military husband and 2 kids in the Northeast. She is also a highly decorated combat veteran and earned her bachelor's degree in business and English, which is why she is also our communications director. And Jeannie Hollingshead is our treasurer, and she is the wisdom of our group. She is a longtime Cambodian, I believe they're called, and has grandchildren attending the local public school. She's at home today. She had knee surgery, but she has spent decades as the financial analyst and recently retired from Cabot Public School District from their financial department. And lastly is Jennifer Rogers. She's our community outreach board member. She is married to a highly decorated veteran as well, who's attending college to become a doctor. They have 4 children, and we met when our oldest, my daughter Emmy and her oldest son were placed in a self-contained classroom together at Cabot. She is finishing up her teaching degree and has spent over 5 years as a college and career mentor, and has traveled the entire, really to third world countries as a missions pastor. So as you can see, our board is not like normal boards, but we are very diverse, and a lot of us have special needs children, and we understand the needs of military members when we move every 3 years and need to get a good education for our kids. So this is my why right here. This is Emmy. We truly believe that whether a child is born with some kind of disability or acquires it later in life, like my daughter did, that all children deserve a better education, really a rich education, because even though someone may be behind, you can still give them the same amount of information that the regular gen ed class has. Excuse me. So our goal is to make all classrooms inclusive and as least restrictive as possible. Emmy has complained for the past year that she just isn't learning what the rest of the classrooms were. And I would talk to her teacher and she said, you know, we aren't given an actual curriculum, we have to create it. And that was kind of where my red flag went up, because they should be learning the same amount of information and the same type of information as their peers, but the special ed teachers are at a loss because they are not given an actual curriculum. Our school will be language arts focused, because when our children can read, they can learn anything. Our children also, we want them to learn appropriate behaviors through modeling and reading. And the way that you do that with special needs is you don't, put them in a secluded classroom. You teach the students that are with those neurodiverse students how to appropriately react to them. We will be using the great books and great classics to teach positive life skills without saying a thing. And we do believe American history should be taught because it has been completely lost in our education system. So let me get into why we wrote this mission. Our mission is to provide a rigorous classical liberal arts education while promoting truth, goodness, and beauty in every subject and for every type of learner. We truly believe that in education, and I'm going to let C.S. Lewis explain it, truth, goodness, and beauty should be introduced because it is so likely that children will meet cruel enemies. Let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter but darker. He was a huge advocate, along with Dorothy Sayers, in classical education. The first thing that I learned about classical education was reading Dorothy Sayers' Lost Tools of Learning. He realized, and he had traveled around trying to teach schools, that if you go back to the model where we are all inclusive, meaning all classrooms stay together and they're intertwined in subjects, children learn a lot more.
Thank you.
Are we good? Okay, so the key features of Omni Classical are presented here, the pragmatic features. We want to create an equitable learning field for all students, no matter their learning style, and the way that we do that is with classical curriculum. We also believe in group style learning, and I'll go into that later, and multi-sensory learning for neurodiverse students. And so when you have a classical education, you can bring in 4 to 5 different teaching methods at the same time to all different levels of students, and I'll kind of explain that later when we get to the curriculum. Our goal is to have every single lesson and every single day character focused. And so we have a rampant bullying problem right now in our schools. And I think the majority of it is because schools separate kids so grossly into special needs or, CBI classrooms. And when those kids roam the halls, they are instantly pinpointed as different. And so if we can take the time to teach our students how to react appropriately, how to, my daughter would come home every day and say she had a kid throwing a fit on the floor, and the teachers, of course, you cannot touch a student, and so she would get down there with them and speak positively while the other kids just went around their day. And I said, well, what would you do, Emmy? And she said, well, I would get down there and tell them, come sit with me and I'll show you what to do. And I thought that's what we should be doing, is having our kids involved with all of these children and their children, the behavior, whether it's emotional or behavioral. We also believe dyslexia should be the focused curriculum for all students. I've always taught my children this way. I didn't know there was a difference, but when you use an actual dyslexia program like Orton Gillingham or the Barton-based, they will use multisensory tools like Play-Doh to learn their letters. They use cursive. They'll use things that are abstract. Fine arts is also a huge key factor in the curriculum with classical. It's integral to the mastery of concepts that link one subject to another. And I like to use this example. If you've ever heard of the Fibonacci series, we spent like 6 months learning the Fibonacci series, and that actual mathematical formula creates a conch shell, like the swirl. And it's a mathematical formula, but when we learned it as a mathematical concept and as art, because every single plant, every seashell, everything that you see has the same mathematical formula. So then we also learn science, because then we go into the science portion, and then finally social studies, because we learned about the life of the man who was the one who invented the Fibonacci series. I'm gonna get caught up here on my words here so I don't talk too much. And so right here is our why. I had about 5 slides for the information why we need a different academic option in Cabot. The red is last year's 10th graders that did not pass or were in great need of support in math and language arts. This is not okay for any of us, and that is why we are here today. So classical education, I've already explained it to you, but really it's broken down into learning styles by the brain development of children. Birth to 10 is your whole parrot stage, is what Dorothy Sayers. It's memorizing. It's the way that you all still remember the ABCs and nursery rhymes your mom said to you. It is constant repetition. Logic stage is a natural progression into the questioning of why, and teachers will show students, hey, you want to question this? Well, let's go to the original source documents. The rhetoric stage is also a natural progression. When students figure out how to find answers, they will then present the answers as a class, and most classrooms are student taught and teacher led. And that is what makes it so good for students who are not possibly at that academic level, because they will learn from other students as well as the teacher. Group style learning, I've already covered. It creates a team mentality. It's perfect for every type of learner, because we will be using auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, either peripherals or songs or whatever we're going to be adding in there. And students are allowed to help each other learn. I learn by song, but someone might learn by mnemonics. And so students will use all those different options to help one another. We will also be using the spiral method. What's great about the Hillsdale Classical curriculum is that the developers knew where the students are starting and where they're going to end up, and so everything that they're taught from K through 12 is revisited over and over and over, all the way through graduation. So the inspiration for Omni was the Latin word for omni is all, or the word all is English for the Latin word omni. And that means that we want to have our classrooms 100% inclusive for all special needs students, any type of learner. We want them to get all of the subjects. We don't want them to just focus on engineering and be math heavy and language arts, soft. We want them to have such a broad depth of education that they don't have to choose a path per se in high school, that they'll have such a good sampling of all the lessons that when they get to college, they'll know exactly what they want to do and save a lot of parents a lot of money. And so our curriculum overview you have before you, along with all of the Hillsdale, we'll be adding in HMH into reading. We'll be using a lot of great classics, and foreign language is started in first grade, along with cursive. Our high school, we are requesting a waiver for the 38 required until we add in all 4 high school years. Our daily schedule is set up most likely like all the other classes. We do have a lot of brain breaks, and we alternate right side brain classes with left side brain classes. And we do a lot of tools for learning. We'll be using the Freudenstein's method to teach our teachers how to understand the learning styles of each student. The 7th and 8th is set up the same way. And so for student services and waivers, if you want to look at that real quick, we will provide a full-time RN and a full-time certified counselor. Because of our special needs group that we are targeting, we want to make sure that we have those on hand at all time. We will provide a special education teacher that is fully licensed along with a dyslexia specialist. We will always target our English language learners with the home-based survey at the beginning of the year. With the Media Center, we're requesting waivers until we can have the full amount of books per student and enough students that we need a specialist. The teachers, of course, will have the outline of standards and everything that they need for the library studies. For transportation, the first year we will not be providing transportation unless a student has it on the IEP. Like my daughter would need transportation because she's in a wheelchair. And as always, it's a college preparatory curriculum, and so we are waiving the gifted and talented program. Real quick, we will be outreaching the local community, specifically our military. We'll work with Airman Family Readiness Center, a lot of Jacksonville community centers we are targeting, and our teachers. We already have an entire 9 applications to fill the first year. And so I don't think we'll have any problems filling our staff. We will always, if we have the cap max of 200, we will be starting our teachers at 50,000 because they will be the cornerstone of our education. For our family and community engagements, we have this a lot in our charter. This is the #1 reason why we're here. We tried to involve ourselves in the local school. We were not allowed to. We tried to ask questions and they said you don't get answers. And so our family and community engagement is very extensive. We will be having workshops at night, first of all, to teach the parents why their kids are singing and dancing when they come home all the time. Where's their homework? Well, it's all through memorization when they're little. And so then the workshops will be for the parents at night. We're gonna have nights and weekends for the parents and the community members that work. We'll be doing a lot of having a lot of volunteer options for our parents. And help ask them to be paras and to actually be part of our school. And we'll always have the open lines of communication with the teachers, with the staff. And then the governance of this, we do not have a sponsoring entity. We felt that if we have heard nightmare stories actually with sponsoring entities stepping in and saying, I think you should be teaching this. You should add this into your academic schedule. And so we felt to preserve the mission and the core of the classical model that the board will oversee everything. We will have a full-time principal and they will be responsible for all the staff and students. And then of course the principal will report to me, or I will work with whatever the principal can't solve. And then of course if something needs to go all the way up to the board, it will. We do have a community action committee that will be with parents, teachers, students, and community members. The principal will oversee that, and that will be monthly, and that will be where parents are allowed to bring their questions, their discussions. Community members can ask anything of that panel. And also, that is when we incorporate children. We've realized when we go to school board meetings, there are so many issues that students have that their parents are raising questions about, but yet the parent or the students are not allowed to ask the questions right now. And so we want to involve students because I think they would have firsthand knowledge of solving the majority of the issues that students face in school. All right, so you all have hopefully the estimated budget. We figured we could start with 150 and still provide K through 8. Just reducing the salaries down to 45,000. We did not include any federal revenue because at this point we don't even know how to guesstimate what kind of students we would have from the special needs community, or if we pulled from Jackson, how to estimate the amount of that we would get for the impoverished community. So we went with state revenue only to make sure that we will be fiscally responsible. While year 1 we don't have much left over, we do feel with the amount of contacts that we have right now, well over 200, that we will not have an issue starting with the cap max of 200. So at this point, I would like to open it for questions. And do you have anything right now? And
no,
I'll go back
at this moment, we'll move to our opposition.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mr. Hollowell?
Yes, I'm here.
You'll have 20, you'll have 20 minutes.
Thank you so much. All right, distinguished members of the board and everyone watching in person or online, thank you for your time and consideration. Let me begin by saying that I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned for myself based on recent social media posts. Once receiving the names of those speaking against the proposed charter, the proposed director of Omni Prep immediately took to social media to say, I was sent the names of 2 people who signed up to speak in opposition to school choice, to speak against options. And then she put 2 thumbs down emojis. Then the head of the charter security, having received those names somehow, also went to social media to ensure everyone that she would be recording and sharing clips of those who are speaking against choice. I first want to make it perfectly clear that I am not speaking out against this charter because I do not want school choice. Having choices is the way that systems thrive. I'm here because Omni Classical Prep is the wrong choice for Cabot, Arkansas, and the surrounding areas. It has been made clear from the beginning that the idea to start this charter school has been a political one and has very little, if anything, to do with wanting a better curriculum and better education. This charter's board president and director are both part of the Moms for Liberty group, which is a right-wing extremist group that uses the guise of parental choice to push bans on curriculums that mention race, discrimination, or LGBTQ rights. The curriculum that they are wanting to use, the 1776 core curriculum, is known Christian nationalist propaganda. By the curriculum's own account, they only teach the history that fits their agenda. As the director of Omni has pointed out, many of the same books from the 1776 core curriculum are used in public schools. However, the public schools also allow for the full story to be told, not just the portion of the story that shines the best light for Christian nationalists. Time and time again, the representatives of the charter have been approached by members of the community, and each time legitimate questions are met with ridicule. The leaders of Omni Prep devolve into name calling, accuse the school board of Cabot Public Schools of being corrupt, having infidelity in their marriages, call them outright thieves, and belittle the school staff while accusing them of grooming kids. They are accusing teachers of being groomers simply by acknowledging the existence of the LGBTQ+ children. Their solution to these perceived problems was to start their own school where they, and I'll quote the proposed director of Omni Prep here, don't want pornographic books in the libraries, racist books in our elementary classes, or allow kids to act the wrong gender or even animals. And they will have uniforms based on their genitalia. These statements clearly show the lack of concern or even the willingness to acknowledge the kids that don't fit the typical mold. When asked directly how they would treat children of the LGBTQ+ community, they either refuse to give a direct answer or say what's on their birth certificate. And what you allow them to do at home is your own business. Therefore, dismissing a child that identifies as trans doesn't stop being trans when they enter the school. They sit here in front of you today asking you to approve their charter. Meanwhile, the board president has actively called for the abolition of the Department of Education. The proposed director of Omni Prep has said that the directors of education in Arkansas are products of their own failed education system. The constant and continued harassment and bullying of CPS board members, superintendent, the librarians, and teachers goes to show this proposed charter is a political move by the Moms for Liberty group. The proposed director has even stated in her Facebook Live videos that the Moms for Liberty meetings were about this charter school. The history of this nation is messy, and we have come a long way. But we did not come this far by ignoring the difficult parts of our past. We came this far because people were willing to look at what was happening, learn from ugly parts of our history, choose to change it, and then take steps to ensure the same things do not happen again. Having an entire school set aside to teach Christian nationalism, toe the line, and anyone that disagrees is obviously against America, is at best problematic. The board and director have said many troublesome things, from they finally remember what a woman is after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, or parents are sending their kids to school proclaiming they are now identifying as an animal or opposite sex, or if you want to send your child to school as he, she, them, that is up to you. This rhetoric shows that they are saying that it's the parents and the teachers with their woke agenda grooming the kids into gender confusion. The proposed director goes on to claim that trans children are suffering from mental illness of body dysmorphia. These statements show this group's unwillingness to accept that maybe, just maybe, these kids are now in an environment of acceptance, patience, and understanding where they can explore what it means to be them. I think the head of security for Omni Prep described the proposed director's statements by saying, some people are infamous for poor word choice. However, when that poor word choice is called into question, it's adult bullies ganging up. And if she makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. Not everyone is going to be someone that you feel you can trust or rely on. Maybe it's just my experience with staff and teachers I've had through my school career, or the wonderful people I've met during my time as a parent with kids in schools, but a principal or director of a school should be someone that you can trust and rely on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Ms. Bosch, you have 5 minutes rebuttal, if you'll give me a second to get my alarm set.
All right, so
You'll have to come to the microphone, please.
as you all know, we have been struggling this entire year during this, and I brought you everything, every email, every board here meeting, everything that's ever happened in the public school district in our area for transparency. This includes the email that you received out of context that looked like I was demanding answers from a librarian. It was part of a FOIA. I have all of my background. I have the police investigation when my audio was taken out of context and I was completely cleared. Even my history was cleared and my social media. I have the ethics violations from Cabot Superintendent and Board of Education that we clearly were done with around January or February, and that's why we decided to possibly start a private or a charter school. We had gone and done our due diligence. We attended meetings. I asked, according to the Arkansas Code, to have a meeting with the Board of Education to look at the Wit and Wisdom book that my son brought home with dead bodies in it as a 10-year-old. He was flabbergasted. And it's the boys of Civil War, and I love Jim Murphy. He is a great historian, but my son had never seen a picture of a dead body before. And he was like, "Mom, there's 5 pages. And so I requested meetings, and they pushed me off, and they said they didn't have to answer my question. And so, replying to Brian Hallowell, Arkansas Code 6-10-1006 specifically says that gender dysmorphia is still recognized in Arkansas. And my whole point was that we will use uniforms. We will, right now, parents, when we were at the Cabot Strawberry Fest, their number 1 issue was bullying in Cabot schools. And many of them started homeschooling. The number 2 issue was academics. And the 3rd issue was the over-sexualization of our kids. And one grandmother was like, my grandson came home one day and said, "I think I'm a girl." And she was just mortified. And so if we follow the Arkansas Code strictly, you are not supposed to talk about sexuality until health class. And even then, the parents have to opt in according to Arkansas Code. So while that was completely taken out of context, making me look anti-anything, we want to provide a school completely inclusive for all types of learners. Why would we reach out to these kids if we did not want them to be involved? Because actually, if a child feels different, this is the place that they would go to feel safe. Because we don't have to talk about sexuality. We don't have to do any of the things that Arkansas Code says we aren't supposed to do. And so that is what our entire mission has been. I am not part of Moms for Liberty. I'm not the director of it. And they have never been a hate organization. And even the investigator who looked over my case said, "Man, I didn't even know you guys existed. I've never seen parents get involved locally in their school board or even the local elections." And so, things can be taken out of context or possibly skewed in a way to make another side look better. But all I know from the very beginning is that my children need a better education, and I knew that we could give it to them, especially our special needs kids. And so that has been our mission all along. So I don't know what's been added in, or maybe I've missed something in our charter, but the Hillsdale curriculum is what we're using and not the 1776. That's actually a free download on the Hillsdale website for homeschoolers. American history, when taught from K through 12, is memorizing the Constitution, it's memorizing the amendments, it's memorizing the Bill of Rights, all the way up until 8th grade. And so they'll learn about, the Pilgrims, just like any other public education will. And then in high school, the curriculum is broken down by like periods of time. And so, the first settlers, the Declaration of Independence, modern world. And that is not part of the 1776 curriculum, so I don't know where that is coming from, because I do have the full curriculum, and that's not part of it. You can find their entire licensure online for K through 12. And I think really, we've been pretty transparent in our charter that Arkansas law has to be followed. I just don't, I guess I don't have anything else to say to any of that, except I have it all right here for you. And I also made a copy for the Department of Education, if they would like to find it as well. And I can give you other copies. But this is everything for just the past year.
Good, thank you. And the code you quoted, Ms. Bosch?
Yes.
The code you quoted?
16, the Arkansas code.
Come back to the microphone, please.
Yes.
The code you quoted was?
I think it's 16-1006, Title 6. It might be 10. I can't read my writing, but yes. It is the beginning of health curriculum and when health curriculum is taught in the schools. Any other questions?
No, thank you. Ms. James, we have public comment. If you'll come to the microphone and state your name and spell it, because I don't have a printout with your name on it.
Hi, my name's Mariah Cobb. It's M-A-R-I-A-H-C-O-B-B.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
I'd like to thank you all for your time and consideration today. As I said, my name's Mariah Cobb, and I moved to Cabot when I was 13 years old. My daughter also attended Cabot Public Schools. It is with that firsthand knowledge that I am here today to tell you why Cabot needs this charter school. I was bullied in Cabot by teachers and by students to the point that I almost took my life in my junior year. The teachers that bullied me are now the assistant superintendent and a school board member. So I was apprehensive when my daughter got to the age of kindergarten whether I was going to enroll her. But I've lived in Lonoke County since I was 13. And so with apprehension, I did enroll her for the 2019-2020 school year. In 3 months, she came home covered in bruises all over her little body, on her ribs, on her thighs, and on her arms from being pinned down on the playground and stomped by a second grader. Cabot did nothing. They tried to punish my child for being bullied by making her not go to recess. So it was at that time I knew I had to protect my child. And so I started looking for an alternative for where to send her. And in Lonoke County, specifically near Cabot where we live, there is none. There is nowhere for these kids to go. So I've homeschooled the last 2 years, working 2 full-time jobs to get that done. And so when I heard about the charter, I was interested. But this is my child's education and I'm the one responsible for it, so I did my due diligence. My grandmother always told me, Mariah, people will always be quick to tell you that your house is on fire so they don't have to look at theirs. There are people that have spoken today who don't want to tend to their house that is on fire. And then there are the women sitting over here who did something about it. They embraced the fact that their children's education was their responsibility, and they went through our democratic process to create an option for all kids in Lonoke County. Our charter schools in Arkansas consistently outperform public schools. Omni Academics has the potential to be the answer to so many Lonoke County parents' prayers. Will there be things that we have to work through? Of course. It's ran by humans. Humans are not perfect. But with the structure and systems in place, I'm confident that we can work through these and create a better outcome for the kids, parents, and charter. I plead with you as a parent who will have to drive her children over an hour into another county to find them a school district that will give them a good education and protect them. Please give this charter a chance. Lonoke County needs it. Thank you.
Ms. James.
I'm Whitney James with the department, staff attorney. So next we're going to go over the remaining issues from the legal review. I think we talked about this most recently in the work session, but the purpose of the legal review is generally focused on the waivers. And just to remind you, if I say I don't have any legal concerns, that does not mean that the panel cannot ask questions and ultimately, of course, make the decision whether or not to grant the waiver. I encourage the panel to ask questions about the waivers, and again, just a reminder for our process. Once an applicant looks at the final legal review, I'll either talk with them on the phone or they will send me something in response, and Ms. Bosch did send me responses to our final legal review. So I'm going to go over some of the changes that they made that resolve some of my concerns and my remaining concerns at this time. And I may need you to come up here for a couple of things whenever it's time. Just going to bring this so I can be notes. Okay. So on the final legal review, I noted that I had some concerns regarding separation of duties between if it's not the sponsoring entity, the governing entity, and the charter. And really just to kind of explain to you where and why that's a problem. If we have a director that has spending power and the director is also part of the sponsoring entity or governing entity, that opens the door to misuse of funds. We've had at least one charter that I can think of in the past that had a director that was the registered agent and also the director, yes, the registered agent of the sponsoring entity and the director, and that opened the door to a lot of problems, and that charter was ultimately revoked. So we don't want to go into a new charter with potential issues that could result in probation or revocation, and I believe that Ms. Bosch has removed herself from the sponsoring entity as an organizer or director, but are you still the registered agent?
Because I started, yes, but I have no power on the board, is what the Secretary of State, because I was the original one that named it Omni Academics, so I'm still the sponsor, not the sponsoring, the registered initial agent, yes.
Okay. And the issue with that is if we have a director with spending power that's part of the governing entity, that can be a problem.
And I don't have any. I mean, I'm not, so the way that we've set up our finances is that the board is the one who creates and approves the budget. And if any money is spent outside of the approved, it has to go through the board and everything has to have 2 signatures. And so I would not be approving finances and then turning around and writing the check for it as well. So that's
Who
one issue.
are the 2 signatures?
The board members, or if they've approved the budget, it is either me or the secretary or the administrative assistant. So she'll always be overseeing everything. And she's not even a staff. That will be in her guidelines to make sure.
Who is she?
We don't have anyone yet.
Who's
So,
the
like-
she? Who is the she we're speaking to? The business manager?
Yes. Well, we've waived the business manager, but she will be essentially running the business section. Yes.
That's the she. I'm trying to figure out who
Yes.
that she is.
Or he. She or he. We haven't hired
What's the
anyone. Yes.
position? What's the position?
It's administrative assistant.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was like, I haven't hired anyone for that yet.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes. Go right ahead.
So just for my clarification, you will still be one of the individuals that can sign off on
Just
checks.
one signature, yes.
You and someone else, but you would still be one of the individuals.
Yes, for
that can
checks
sign
and
off.
balances, yes.
But it would be someone that you've employed and have the right to fire as the second signature.
It could be. Yeah.
It is or
It
isn't?
is right now, and they can put a checks and balance in there.
Chair, I have a
Yes.
clarifying question. Just, this person would be supervised by you? Yes.
Yes, just like the public education system set up right now, yes. Is that the only one? So I guess the only way to remedy that would to be remove the Omni Academics name as the 501c3. I mean, because the Secretary of State said I'm not part of the board. initially created the name.
We're just trying to figure out
Yeah,
who's
I am
going to be,
too.
we're trying to figure out who is making financial decisions and who's signing checks.
Okay, so the board makes all financial decisions, and everything like salary and normal financial issues that are monthly, the bills, that gets done by the board. Let's say if a vendor comes in and we have to pay them on the spot, it would be me and either the principal or the administrative assistant that would have to write the check. And there would be 2 signatures on that.
That's the part that's confusing to us. So either expense, if the board is making all financial decisions,
Well, not just, I'm sorry, the budget, the overall budget. So if we have a budget of vendors, right, that's $500 for the month, we're allowed to write checks for that. If it goes above that budget, it has to go back to the board.
So what's the threshold? 500?
No, it's 1,000 in the
1,000, okay.
And that's for something that's completely like not prepared for. It has to go into the budget to be written.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
yes, sir.
Yes, I'm gonna put my CPA hat on for a second and maybe walk through this process with you, because I think this is a good point of discussion, and it's good to get this resolved in a way that's smooth in front end. So my experience as a banker is that the registered agent is usually more or less an inactive position that was created during the process of incorporating. And so what I've usually seen is that a registered agent gets legal notices and doesn't really do much else. It's not an active member of management or of any, it definitely doesn't write checks or do any of that. So if your board is going to be overseeing the finances through approving the budget, and you have a financial person, I think you said when you were introducing folks that you do have a financial person that's a board member.
The treasurer, yes.
Maybe that person can also be what I would maybe call a chief financial officer or a chief financial person, maybe the financial expertise designated financial person on the board, and then you have someone on staff that's a controller or someone that is kind of in a more traditional chain of command, because I get the separation of duties, and I've seen that when that's not done on the front end, it creates awkward discussions, but also it can create problems if people do things they shouldn't do, and we don't want that. You don't want to create a structure that creates that opportunity. I can tell that you guys want to shoot straight on this, so I would look at that and possibly consider how you fix that if you could.
Perfect.
Do you have a reply?
Yeah, so Jeannie is our financial analyst, like she's done this for 30 years, and so I think the board would definitely put her as the CFO and have her oversee all finances. And I think she would gladly do that, because she's the person who thinks in numbers, and I even said I don't want to be part of the budget, but I understand that when we look at all the rest of the charters, it is a duty responsibility. And so hopefully the principal can deal with that more. But it's in both of our job titles, so yes.
It's the words you're selecting, like hopefully.
Well, no,
That
they will.
make
It
me
has to be
nervous.
written into the charter, so I mean, I can have Monica assure you that it'll be written into the charter, yes.
So
Yes.
that's you're causing us anxiousness.
Oh, don't
when
get
you-
anxious, I'm sorry, but I just don't want to
So-
say that it's positive right now until it is signed by the board.
Then just say that.
Yes, it will be signed by the board.
Okay. So it's
The
those
separation.
tentative words that make us tentative too.
That is,
So,
I'm sorry.
well, no, don't be sorry. I'm just saying that's what causes us to keep digging when it's tentative. We're looking for a commitment, either yes or no, or
Oh,
that's something the
definitely.
board's going to have to decide and come back to us, or
Perfect.
something like that.
If it would be like a resolution in board minutes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Next.
I'm sorry.
You have oh, go ahead.
And the individual that you're thinking about that would serve in that CFO position, she's currently a board member.
She is the treasurer,
Okay.
but then that would be a conflict of interest, wouldn't it? Well, no, it's not, because they're already responsible for the finances.
We might wonder if anyone from finance could contribute to our discussion.
So if I call the secretary, if the huge issue is that I just was the sponsoring entity, which Mr. Baldwin said I have no role. And when the Secretary of State office talked to me, they said, you just created it and filled out the paperwork, but I am not part of the board. So there is a complete separation there. I still don't find that.
We're trying to make sure that we know who is going to have the right to withdraw funds and what the consequences of that are. So is there oversight into the finances, you know, and what is that oversight? And that's where we're trying to understand the segregation of duties, you know.
Well, and so that is already in the charter, the segregation of duties. So not realizing that you still see that as a problem as the person who filled out for the Omni Academics, even though I'm removed and I've sent you that paperwork, that's the legal document from the Secretary of State's office. She received that. They're the ones that create the budget, and then through that, we pay the bills that are either not automatically drafted and set up by the board, but we have to have 2 signatures, and so there is that separation.
That's where it got fuzzy.
Yeah.
On the who was going to sign the checks.
Yeah, and so there's 3 of us in the admin office as of now.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping back in here. I think if you could define for us who the check signers are, I mean, that would be a board resolution. And if one of those check signers is your treasurer and the other check signer is a school principal or, you know, some other person in operations, I think that would be helpful. And then to let us know that every check would be signed by 2 people, you know, some type of wording like that.
Okay, that gives us kind of a more clear guidance. We will put Jeannie as one of the check signers on all checks.
And the other?
And I appreciate it, because I was getting a little confused again when you were going back to a board member being
Yes.
serving in 2 roles. That was getting confusing for me.
But it's not a paid position. She's just the treasurer of the board, essentially the CFO.
Dr. Saunders? If you'll give us some clarification, please.
Sure. Anything specific that I can answer on that? I think just my overall concern is exactly what you brought up, and it's really looking at the segregation of duties within the daily operations as far as who does what. You have one superior, the director, and then one administrator. I believe the principal that was first listed as those with financial duties, and those were the only 2. I did not have the duties listed as the administrative assistant.
Administrative assistant.
Yeah, I did not have that, and so, you know, I think it definitely would need to be some language put in over exactly what all the operations would look like, what the flow of that would be, who all would be involved with that, and how that process would go to ensure that.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Dr. Saunders.
Yes.
Ms. James?
The next remaining concern, and this was in my final legal review, Ms. Bosch did submit some additional budget information, or I would call it a revised budget, showing what her outlay looks like with 150 students and 175. The remaining issue I see is that with 150 students, there's only a net revenue of $698 at the end of the year. And one of the big issues is that I believe this school plans to have quite a few special education children and children with IEPs. And I don't have a finance background, but I'm not sure that there's enough built into the budget for special education, and there's nothing built into the budget for transportation. So I am concerned about the $698 being all that's left with the 150 students. And that does tie into a legal concern, because again, if a charter doesn't meet its financial obligations, then it
Yes,
could be
yeah.
revoked, or the charter could be placed on probation. I'll let Ms. Bosch respond to that concern.
And so, because our students will not be in an alternate learning environment, they will be with a specific teacher. We don't have to provide more than one pull-out resource teacher, which would be our licensed and certified special education, who would oversee their IEPs, the 504s, or whatnot, because our teachers will be trained to educate in such a broad. But like my daughter, she needs a one-on-one para, and that's something that's required in her IEP. So we have built in at least 1 to 2 paras if we have 150 students. And then we just were approved for the Medicaid community-based, finally, program, because the governor just increased 3,000 waivers. She actually will have someone that goes with her to school all the time. We don't have to provide that, but other kids may not have that. And so we did put the paras in there, and there's so many parents that have students that you wouldn't consider special needs, but possibly they have a 504, or they just need a little bit slower time on tests. Those parents have already offered to be volunteers during those times, just to oversee test taking or whatever. They wouldn't be actively paid. But we have, let's see, for first year, we have 1 full-time sped teacher, and 1 full-time paraprofessional. And so that para, depending on what the course is, because K through 8 is so different, and I really wanted to give you an example, but there's so much group learning that takes place for certain things. Like, let's say K through 3 is going to all memorize the Constitution. So we'll have a lot of group activities, and they get together and they sing and dance. And a lot of times the teachers all join together. There's not more than, the 10 to 12 students per teacher. And having it split up between K through 8 and only having 150 kids, they're extremely small classrooms. And so I don't see a problem when we talked about what we see right now at Cabot, needing more than 1 para and 1 full-time special education teacher for 150 kids, because it's just not being provided. And the way that our education is they don't need to be writing. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a classical classroom, but all of it's auditory. And if a student can't write, like my daughter, she memorizes everything. And if a student only writes, then they would write it down, and all classes for them would be recorded and sent home. We didn't see an issue with it at all. And according to the transportation, we have applied for the charter grant, and if that is needed, we can pull out from other parts on the budget as needed. But we really did not want to add any federal funding, which we will be getting a lot of with the amount of special needs students, if we have the amount that we guesstimate. We didn't put down for any federal refunds for our lunch program. We didn't put any of that. We added that into our initial state funding only. We tried to use Cabot and Jacksonville, as our initial, and we could not get a firm number. We just don't know who's going to be part of the charter.
Ms. Saracen.
Just to clarify, 1 special ed teacher, and this person would satisfy both resource and self-contained?
No, we don't have any self-contained.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yes, so we will have no self-contained classrooms. All students will be included into the general ed classroom, because that is what we've been fighting right now with Cabot. All of our kids are not mentally disabled, but they were labeled as so, and they have been self-contained. And that's actually what, I don't know if you guys are following the Every Student Succeeds Act, but Cabot was found by the federal government to be in violation of that for the past 10 years. And so the self-contained students that say we do get a CBI student, that they would still be in class with the other students with a para, and they would still be read to. We are not providing the alternate learning environment or self-contained.
Inclusive practices, 100%.
Ms. Newton.
First of all, I'll issue this disclaimer that I'm not an educator and not from a family of educators, but my concern is about the special needs students. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when special ed was started, and it evolved into many different things. And initially, all kids were in classroom together. Then there became a need for, I guess, data. Data was data driven, that some children, because of their disabilities, are better served in a self-contained classroom. And also that's the same for the children that are in the classroom that don't have any special needs. So I'm wondering what justification based on data that shows that this won't inhibit learning as opposed to contributing to young people learning better. I've seen it evolve, and I've seen it evolve in a child being disruptive or just being pulling attention away from regular class and needing to learn by themselves. So I'm concerned about that. Certainly, I don't want to see kids indiscriminately put into self-contained classrooms, but there are, to my knowledge, definitely a need for separation in some cases.
So this is the whole reason why we created our mission, is to not allow the separation. And to make sure that, so we will have a full-time counselor on staff, and we have a set of guidelines that we want to introduce. And that was the big thing. So Arkansas has not been following the guidelines of IDEA and Every Student Succeeds Act. And many of the schools have, but the majority have not. And so while we have a disruptive student, we actually have a parent that is very interested in the charter. They just never worked with him. So they just shoved him in an ALE, and at that point, then they were put on computers. So there was no interaction. They just used the Edmonton curriculum. And she said, everyone treats him differently now. And as I sat down and talked with him, all he needed was just someone to work with him. And we want to make sure that there's every avenue possible to include these students, and then train our children how to interact verbally and to talk them down or to bring them part of the group. Because for the 10 years that I was in homeschool co-ops, and you have a lot of special needs kids in co-ops, they were never separated, they were never isolated, they were right there with their classmates, and the students treated them like normal human beings, just with different behaviors. And so that has been our complete goal this entire time. And so I can understand, we looked at the history of like self-contained and CBI classrooms, and sadly, my daughter went through a CBI classroom, and they were eating popcorn and watching movies, and she's like, well, I want to be part of that classroom. And her teacher actually said, would you like to put your daughter in CBI? And I was so appalled that I couldn't even talk to her, because my daughter's intelligent. And why would you just do that to her? And so we don't want to provide CBI, we don't want to provide self-contained, but we do want to have the counselors, we do want to have the training to be able to teach those students. And let's say someone is, physically, they have emotional outbursts. That is the time that I think is the great period of time for our children to have character development.
Okay, and I think with the mention you made of the teacher that made a comment, that's horrific, and I certainly would be concerned about that. But on the other hand, I think that just the all-inclusive part of that is really bothersome, because it may not be a student that is having an episode based on something that's just a stimulus that's not present all the time, but ongoing. I've certainly seen children, students that it's obvious to me, and I'm not an educator, that not isolating in the sense of punishment, but having a closed environment certainly is more likely to be able to have them educated than having them in another environment. Because I think you're going to have a range of children. You're going to have some children in a classroom that are not special needs, but they are easily distracted. So that's a problem. So you're getting them into the groove of doing stuff, and then the student that's distracting is preventing that for a variety of different reasons. And certainly, I'm just referring to special needs at this time, because I've seen what I thought to be have colleagues that are special needs and self-contained doing a very good job. And I still think that is something to be considered, because you don't know what or who is going to come and what needs they'll have. That's my concern.
Thank you. Yes.
Dr. Wright McMurray.
Okay. I actually have two questions. First question, going a little bit back to what your balance will be if you have 150 students. If you could speak to a little bit about what happens if you don't have the 150, how do you plan to still make your budget? And then my second question is that we understand that the power of special education for our students is that students learn differently. And we have educators that are very passionate about what they do, but there is needed additional training for them to understand how to support students that learn differently. And you have the one special education teacher that's their trained area. You have other teachers, it looks like, that are educators, but they may not be special education teachers. So can you speak a little bit about how are they going to be trained? How are they going to fully understand how to provide those services? Because even though I'm a passionate educator, I may not fully understand how to effectively educate individuals that have special needs.
Correct. So, a few, like our special needs teacher will be trained in the Feuerstein method, and that is the method. She was from Israel, and you can look it up. And that is
Would you say it again?
Feuerstein, Feuerstin. And that is specified training where each child is individually looked at, and I guess, like an entire synopsis of their learning styles is written down. So I have 4 children. I have one that needs flashcards. That's my oldest. She can't sing a thing. She can't sit and memorize with someone else. She has to have flashcards. My second one would have to run in circles and chant it. It was the weirdest thing ever, but that's what we let him do. Emmy was complete auditory. She only has to hear it once. I mean, I have a YouTube of her 3 years old stating all of her states and capitals, and we just thought she was like the next prodigy. And now I have my youngest. I haven't figured him out yet. But I do know that he is 3 senses. He's got to hear something 3 times, he's got to write it down once, and then he has to repeat it back to me. And so that essentially is what this method does, is it takes each child during that alternative learning, or the tools for learning, I think we called it, and they will analyze each child. So that's just the way that they learn. We would like to send all of our teachers to NILD training, which Arkansas does not have, and that is the specialized special needs training. And the closest one, I think, is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And when we just went to our classical conference, we met with the largest classical school in California. Their tuition is $20,000 a child. And they have built their entire program around special needs. And that's where we got the majority of our ideas. After they grew to have about 350 students, they were able to add in a self-contained classroom for those students that could not be part of it. But she said all students were included up to the point where they had more than enough funding to bring in an additional specialized teacher. And she's like, it's always worked because the students have learned how to work with their environment and their students. But we will be training them at the NILD training, which is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that is built in. And I think even the counselor and everybody.
Is this decision based on the lack of funding? Because you said when they were able to, they had a self-contained classroom. So is your decision to have all students together based on funding, or?
No, we would really like to see the mission to fruition, like to make sure that, what we've seen not work for the past 5 years, we want to give it a few years to try to incorporate all students and be completely inclusive. And we did write in the charter, if an ALE is obviously needed, we will provide one. And we will come back and ask for that to be, included, and we'll get an amendment. But as parents and the board and groups, when we discussed this, we really wanted to have a completely inclusive classroom.
Go right ahead.
I'll come back to that one, but my other question, if you don't have the 150, what is your plan to still be able to make your budget?
Depending on the ages of children, we will most likely just have fewer grades. But we can't break it up. So it'll be either, K through 4 or K through 5 or 6, but we would not provide a K and an 8. And we would have to come back and discuss it with the panel. Because at this point we have more than enough that's on the wait list, that have requested to be part of it, but if we don't have at least 150, we will just probably reduce the amount of grades that we have.
Mr. Baldwin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So following up on Dr. Wright Murray's question about the number of students. So walk us through, I guess my question, as I've heard you talk, would be how many kids are on your wait list right now? So how many do you realistically expect that you would have when you open up? You know, will it be the 150? You know, if you have 200 on the wait list, 150 sounds probably reasonable, but if you have, you know, 75 on the wait list, it may not be. And I think some type of a plan that has numbers in it, financial numbers, to show maybe a best case, likely case, and a worst case,
For the worst case scenario.
on students. And that way, you know, depending on what happens, you're not scrambling, you know, at that point in time to figure out what do you do. So having some type of a structure based on that. But you know, if you have 200 waitlists on your list, maybe you don't worry about that. So talk us through how many students you have on the list, and what alternative planning you might have affected.
So we had already written that, so we have the 200, and they are K through 8 already, and that's without outreach. That was just meeting at the cab at Strawberry Festival and letting them know our vision, and they said, oh my gosh, sign me up. And then the other one is on the Omni Academics website. We have send for more info and just sign up for it, and we have received over 100 signs for that as well. So with outreach, I do not think we'll have a hard time matching that, but let's say that we are stuck with 75 kids. We have already planned in January, the timeline, we'll be reaching out starting from the approval of the charter all the way up through January, and we will reassess January 15th to see where we're at. Most likely it'll be March where we make that final decision, and at that time we will create the alternate budget. We already have, you know, multiple things estimated already, but we'll create the final budget in March to make sure that we have enough finances to cover the teaching, the special eds, and most likely we'll remove the principal. We would not need the extra administrator.
Ms. Green, Yvonne Green has joined us online, and Ms. Green works in our special ed unit, so we reached out to her. So my question, you said there would be no self-contained, and that self-contained would not be allowed. Those were your words.
Not allowed. It would just, our first few years, we do not want self-contained classrooms.
Okay.
We want to be 100% inclusive.
So, but students that, I mean, we don't know who's coming.
Right.
So a student could come in with an IEP that has previously been in a self-contained classroom. So Ms. Green, would you kind of talk us through the process of a student that might sign up for this charter that has an IEP?
Sure. So the IEP for a student would have to be implemented as it's written until the district has data to support changes in that student's IEP. And that could mean, as Ms. Kaufman said, that student comes in and needs those self-contained services. So those services would have to be provided. Now, as you are looking at overall student needs, as any district looks at overall student needs, they can also look at what supports and services, what assistive technology is going to be put in place to help that student be successful in whatever environment they're in. But every decision for a student with an IEP is based on the data for that particular child and for the based on their IEP and how their evaluation is outlined and what other services there may need to be. So that continuum needs to be available for any student who may need it.
And Ms. Green, then if you were going to change the IEP, you would have to go through a process.
Yes, ma'am. So that individualized IEP is developed through the IEP committee, which has required committee members, and that's federally mandated, that process as far as who's on that committee, including special educators, administrators, parents, and general education teachers, and an evaluation representative, so that that committee together can create a plan for that child that is based on all of the child's needs, a holistic environment and educational plan for the child.
And Ms. Green, what is the ratio in this school? We don't know who the students will be yet, so we don't know the number of students that will be on an IEP. But typically, if students are being served in an inclusion model, what's the typical ratio of students per SPED teacher?
So our regulations outline a variety of scenarios based on student needs and the type of services a teacher is providing. If a child is getting a resource service, which is typically a combination of general education with some pull-out supports, that teacher can hold the folder and be the case manager for up to 25 students. The guidance, it's not in rules, but the guidance for the number of students with IEPs in a general education setting is typically no more than a third. And we also try to emphasize that it match the natural proportions of the district. So if the district has 10% of their students as students with disabilities, then we would hope to see no more than 10% of the students in a general education classroom being served in that environment also at a time. If there is a teacher who is providing self-contained services based on the student's needs, we have different models within our regulations. We have a 1-to-6, which requires a paraprofessional. Typically, the students in a 1-to-6 ratio classroom would be students with more significant physical needs and maybe more significant cognitive needs, really complex students who require a lot of support and need that smaller ratio. We also have a 1-to-10 ratio and a 1-to-15 ratio. So again, based on the needs of the students and how well they are able to be independent would depend on how which ratio would be selected for that student to be in. And for the 1-to-15, 1-to-10, 1-to-6, those teachers can only have up to 15, 10, or 6 students in their class. So the number of students is the same as the number of students that they would be the case manager for.
And my final question, what are the guidelines for transporting a student, an IEP student?
So if a student has transportation written in their IEP, then the district is obligated to provide transportation. That can be via a bus, it could be a school van, it could be through reimbursing the parent for the mileage. So there are different ways to provide the transportation, but if it is in a student's IEP, then it's part of that child's individual plan, and that's part of that child's free and appropriate public education or FAPE. Therefore, it must be provided.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Green? Mr. Zellner?
So going back to the projected $698 revenue balance the first year with 150 cap, that stood out to me in looking through the packet. And then in looking at the salary schedule that was presented with a minimum cap of 150, I noticed for the director, the principal, and the counselor, the 3 salaries on the salary schedule were consistently $5,000 less than
The teachers.
than the salaries that were in the packet, the low end of the range for each one of those. So would you explain to me the difference
So
in those two
in the
documents?
range so if that's our lowest amount is 150, we would just reduce the incoming new teachers, the starting rate or the directors at that amount. We don't want to go less. So we would pull from, let's say we need, brand new desks or chairs. We would probably have to get them used, depending on the way that it goes. But the way that we set up our budget, and it was one of our core issues when creating it, is that the teachers need to be paid according to the amount of work that they do, and we did not want to go less than $45,000, depending on starting salary, and we didn't want to overpay the administration.
Okay, so just to confirm,
Yes.
the salaries listed in the salary schedule
Isn't
for
there a
director,
range?
principal, and counselor for the 150 cap, that was not a mistake on your part. That was a cognizant
yes, and-
decision you made.
Yes, and we will
Okay.
reduce that range by 5,000 if we have to.
Ms. Bosch, what is you said you would use allied therapy services
Yes.
for OT, PT, and speech. Yeah, what's the general cost of that?
So we'll use Medicaid, and the majority of our kids will go through Medicaid for the reimbursement. And then, we have both private and Medicaid, but the school doesn't have to use our private, but they can. We choose to use a lot of our services outside of school because school, when therapy is done in school, it has to relate to the schooling that they get. So they're not going to come in and teach my daughter to walk. While that would make it easier for her to get from class to class, they're going to do a lot of OT to help her use her pen, her pencil. Right now, PT at school will stretch out her muscles and try to get her from a sit stand to help move her from, let's say, the wheelchair to the toilet. So we use a lot of outside, but it is Medicaid reimbursed. And they are going to take care of all of that. We've already used Allied.
Ms. Green, are there other guidelines that we need to know about?
Yes, ma'am. When a student has related services in their IEP, those related services are there to support their special education and are an educational requirement, whether they're Medicaid reimbursable or not. And we know that there are students who are able to qualify for Medicaid, and then 3 months later they may not, and then 6 months later they may. So that's kind of a moving thing, regardless of what a student's Medicaid status is. The school is obligated to provide any related services in the IEP because those related services are required in order for that child to advance educationally.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I do have another, clarifying question, and maybe Ms. Green can help with that. So the ratios that you mentioned that are recommended for the special education to have students on there that they're working with, so the model that we're currently being presented, where there's one special education teacher, but there's 9 teachers that will be provided professional development to be able to support students with disabilities. Does that meet the expectations of your recommended ratios that you shared earlier?
So the ratios are in place regarding how many students a teacher is serving as case manager for. So she's basically the lead teacher in ensuring the paperwork and the meetings and the services are in place for those group of children. The IEPs still must be followed, and as far as training goes and looking at general education teachers being provided training, however that happens, I think that's a really good thing, because we want our general ed teachers to be able to work with all students. That includes our students with disabilities. One of the things we frequently say is students with disabilities are gen ed students first. So they should be getting that core plus more. So they're getting core curriculum. They need to be included with core curriculum as much as possible. So having that cross training between gen ed and special ed, because the special educator can be the one expert to come in and help make accommodations and specialize the instruction for that child, whereas the curriculum, the core teacher is going to be an expert in content for that area. So there should be a pairing between the staff in order to effectively meet student needs. And that also helps provide the full continuum of gen ed through self-contained supports for students.
Thank you.
And we don't expect to have more than 25 students per classroom. I know that, there's a max, but the way that the classrooms are laid out and the number of students that we receive, I don't see us having more than what she said would. If you had a quarter or a third of your students special needs, you should have no more than 25. And according to the statistics in Cabot, there's 10% special needs or that are on IEP, and Jacksonville's around the same. So I can't see that our school would just only take special needs. It would just be part of our classroom environment.
So, Ms. Bosch, you said that your child would need transportation. I'm assuming you would transport your own child to school.
Right.
And that your child had a one-to-one parapro. So if you only have one parapro and your child is receiving the service, then that doesn't.
Right, we would, and that's where we have to reassess once it comes, because we could not guess how many kids, and there's only one student in all of Cabot, except one in high school, that they have a one-on-one para. And so we looked at the statistics of what Cabot currently has and what we would need.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Mr. Baldwin?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Green, I do have a question, and I have to start my question by saying that I'm really out of my league in all of this, and I know you know all this very well. So when we were talking about the in-classroom separation of the students with special needs, that's a different model than what these folks are wanting to do. And I guess my question is the separate classroom a state statute requirement, or is it a DESE policy? So is there flexibility, or is there no flexibility in this? Because it gets kind of down to the model that this school wants to go in. And if there is no flexibility, then I don't know what we do. So that's my question.
So again, that's based on each child's individualized education plan and what's written into that plan based on that child's needs. So if a child would enroll and their IEP says that they need to have all of their instruction in a very small setting, and all of that instruction is provided primarily by the special education teacher, which is what we would call a self-contained type of classroom, then the district's obligated to provide that, because that's what that child's IEP team determined was the most effective learning environment for that student based on their overall needs. So there's not a specific rule that says a district must have a self-contained classroom. There is, both in Arkansas regulation and in federal law, the idea of providing a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And those are all words that are within the law, but we have to provide what's appropriate for a child without charge in the least restrictive environment that is appropriate for that child to be able to make progress on the goals and curriculum that's outlined in their IEP. So yes, it's there because we have to do what's in the IEP for that child, but it's not, I can give you a specific number that says you will have a self-contained classroom.
Maybe my question would be, thank you for that response. Who is it that, so I don't know really what an IAP is, and who comes up with that? Is that the school that will come up with it? Is it the teachers? Is it the state? Who develops that for each student?
That is a great question. It is a committee that is composed of the special educator, the general educator, the parent, a person who is representing the LEA, which means they are able to understand curriculum, they're able to supervise people, and they can make fiscal decisions about needs that might come up in that conversation. So a person who can approve whatever fiscal implications occur from the decisions in that meeting, and a person who is knowledgeable about evaluations, so that together the parent is going to have the perspective of what the child's strengths and needs are outside the school setting. The special educator is the person who can help develop a specially designed instruction and really say, here's what we can do to help this child be successful. The general educator is the one who can say, here's the curriculum, here's the content, and here's how we can work together to help that child achieve the grade level content. And then the evaluator is the person who can look at all of the evaluation data and say, this is where this child currently is based on all of the different assessments that I've given. You can also have other people in that meeting based on that particular student's needs, but those are the core requirements. And so that's the group of people that are making individual decisions for that child. And then kind of evolving from that, you don't want to have across the board decisions such as, in this school district, we only provide inclusion, or in this school district, we only do pull out. So again, that continuum comes into play. It's written into each child's IEP, and we don't want to see cookie cutter IEPs, because then that's not an individualized decision for a child if each child has the exact same individualized plan.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the next topic, Ms. James?
I will add that my colleague Christy Park in legal, who works with special education, she reminded me that the continuum is required by federal law. The next waiver topic I'd like to cover is food services. Ms. Bosch did let me know that the charter does plan to participate in the National School Lunch Program and Breakfast Program. So just to clarify that. And I would ask her to please confirm that since the school is not requesting any food services waivers, that they will meet all of the requirements of the law and child nutrition rules.
Yes, we will.
And Ms. Dill, Nancy Dill is online. Ms. Dill, did you have any additional comments or questions?
I do have a few things. And first of all, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. I do have a few comments on it, just and it's some of it's kind of a use of words, but there are some things I want to make sure that Ms. Bosch is aware of, just so, because I don't like surprises myself, so I want to kind of clear some things up. She did make the statement in her charter application that they would apply for the program, and it's really not an application per se, but anyone that intends to have the program in their schools, they need to fill out a policy statement and an agreement, and you get that through this office, this child nutrition office. I did put a link in the Google document, and I'll be happy to provide that for you if you need that. But that has to be done. It is just a statement saying you'll provide and you'll provide reimbursable meals, and that you will conform to and abide by all the federal regulations. And there are a few state regulations that are a little bit different from the feds, but mostly it's a federal program. She did mention special groups, civil rights groups, and the ones that she did mention in her application, she did cover all of the protected individual classes in that. No child is ever denied a meal. We feed based on free, reduced, and paid status. and because she did mention the meal applications, those come from our website. Eligibility is based on household size and household income, and unless you have a child that's a SNAP child or a member of another categorical group. I didn't, and I have to confess, I did not look through the entire document that you presented. I don't know where your program will be housed, but if you plan to serve meals, and I hope that you do, you will need to check with the health department. And in this case, this would be Lone Oak County. It would be and the county seat is in Lone Oak, so it would come from there. It would be the sanitarian that does all the health inspections for food service establishments, because you would need a permit. They would inspect your facility and provide the permit and tell you what you do and don't, what you do need in order to operate a meal service in there. So that would be really important. And it would be required before you could serve food or store food in that location. So check with them, and they would tell you what you would need to do to have the operation. And you did make mention of preferred meals. Preferred Meals used to provide vended meals for some of our charter schools. They didn't survive the COVID. So Preferred Meals is no longer in business, but they are part of another food service management company called Elior. Elior has taken over that function. They are a registered company in the state, and on our child nutrition website under the food service management tab, we do have a list of all of the food service management companies that are registered in the state, which they have to register with us each year. So you might want to explore another option if you are still trying to considering providing that type of meal service. Meals are claimed. That's how you get your reimbursement, is to have the monthly claim done, and you're paid for the meals that you serve based on meal status. And one other thing that I did want to bring up, you apparently will have a fairly large population of children with special needs. You would need to be able to accommodate any of those children that might have a special dietary need. We do have, we have dysphagia diets, we have diabetic diets, we have altered textures for children that don't chew well. That's just a few of them, and there's a lot of different types of special diets, but those diets are typically part of their IEP plan, and someone can speak better to that than I can, but that would be something that would certainly need to be addressed. In the Google Doc, I did include a link to our child nutrition website. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch with one of us. We have, in the office, we have about 8 area specialists that are assigned to the schools, the public schools, as well as the public charters. So you would always have a person that you would be able to contact if you had questions, or that would need to be available to help you get a program set up. And I will say, there's a lot of pieces to this program. Sometimes our charters might struggle a little more than others, just simply because it's a personnel issue. Everybody wears a lot of hats there. You would need to have a designated director that would be in touch with this office. We would need somebody that would be like our contact person for your claims and for a review, and we'd have to get your menus certified so you could get your maximum reimbursement rates. But those are things we would cover with you. And if your plan does come to fruition and you were going to serve our program, you would need to have that policy statement and agreement completed with this office.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms. Dill.
thank you.
Ms.
You're
Bosch,
welcome.
do you have a designated director that will be identified for child
Yeah.
nutrition?
Yes, I'll be doing the food service.
A lot of times, it may be a principal, it may be the chief financial officer. Like I said, they wear a lot of hats in those charter schools.
Thank you, Ms. Dill.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions regarding child nutrition? Ms. James, our next topic.
Now we're to the waivers, and a lot of this is cleanup. And there are some that I would ask Ms. Bosch to provide some additional rationale on. On the first two waivers for superintendent and principal, I don't have any legal concerns with the citations that she's listed, but we might need some additional rationale regarding how the school will ensure that their administrators are properly trained.
So we'll abide by the same training as regular teachers. We will make sure all of our teachers are qualified in RISE. Everyone will be in AQT.
So let's stick with principal and superintendent.
Okay, sorry. They will also, because we're also requesting to not have them licensed in case we have to pull someone that's been directing a classical school as a principal and they don't have a teaching license in Arkansas, because I have them all together. So the superintendents, principal, one or the other, depending on how large our school is, will be going through the LEADS training, and they will also have the same amount of hours that the regular public school administrators have. We will also be doing a lot of additional training outside of the public education realm into the classical realm to make sure that the mission is adhered. Because if you bring someone in that's never seen a classical classroom, it's very difficult to continue with it.
Ms. Saraceni? You're not on.
Can you hear me now? Yes, it's on. I just want to clarify, if you have a new superintendent or principal, they'll go through the beginning administrator training, just like,
Yes.
okay, I just want to clarify.
We're just
that.
requesting the waiver for, I think it's the loss of words. The administrators go through, yes.
The license.
Yes.
Okay.
Say that again? What are you requesting a waiver for?
So they won't have a license, they'll still go through the, and I think it was the 3-year, yes.
Administrator
Beginning
training.
administrator, they'll do the same training.
Okay, so I think in your plan, you said they might not.
No, they will go through the training, they're just not going to do the mentorship program completely followed. So they'll do the
Then that's
same.
not.
So it's not, but we will do the training. We're asking for a waiver for it, but we're going to go through it.
No. We need to know what we are doing. So is the director principal going to participate in the mentor training, or they're not?
Okay, so yes, they are then, because when we read it, that it was a requirement that they do alternate things outside of the classical charter sphere. And if it's not, if it's just the sign up for the LEADS training and the mentorship training, then we will do that. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not sure.
So what do you,
Please,
let's clarify this.
I'm trying to understand what you are committing to.
So the director, myself, I will be trained, but the principal, we definitely are putting the principal or the administrator through the LEADS training. Now, the way that the mentorship program, because we want a principal that is licensed and qualified, but we are requesting a waiver on it because our model is not for the training. They will all go through the training. The licensure is what we are requesting a waiver on because we may have to pull someone from outside of the state.
So we're separating those two things.
Yes.
Licensure is one.
Yes.
They will or will not be licensed. We're asking, Ms. Saraceni is asking you about training.
Yes.
That's where you're being very vague, and that's what
we will be doing the mentorship program. But see, I'm
It's
sorry.
where in the beginning administrator training is where you will get your leads.
Yes.
So that's all wrapped up into one?
It's all wrapped up together.
Yes,
That is
because that
correct.
comes out of my office. That's why I'm just
And
clarifying.
the way that I did our waiver, and that's probably why it's confusing, it's all listed together.
So you haven't committed that you as the director would go through the mentoring training?
I will go through the mentoring training.
Okay. So.
I should have broke this out like Miss James broke it out to me when she sent it back to be more clear. We are only requesting the waiver on licensure. Yes, I'm sorry.
Any other questions, panel members, regarding the director and the principal? And what number of students would you decide that you don't need a principal?
If we are at below 150, we will not have a principal. And I believe that the max is 300. So if we had to do something, but in my opinion, and they can refer back to the budget, we have more than enough to afford a principal to oversee the school after 150 students.
What are you committing to?
150 and above. I
You will
said
have
the
a
only
principal.
time that we won't look at a principal is under 150.
Okay.
Mhm.
Ms. James, are you ready to move to teachers?
Clarify a couple of things, please. So, just to clarify, Ms. Bosch, are we removing the superintendent mentoring program waiver?
Is that 617?
These are the rules governing
So
superintendent
I
mentoring
don't
program.
have, didn't we break that down just to section 7, or is that the second one?
You're on teacher
Yes.
licensure.
No, so you broke down your waivers separate than mine, and they're all together.
Okay.
So yes, we are removing that because we only included Arkansas Department of Education rules governing education licensure.
And you want to remove the licensure requirement on principal, which is subsection A.
Yes.
Okay.
Remove or add? What are we?
I'm sorry, add licensure requirement for the waiver, but you're not asking to waive the remainder of the code section, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other changes?
Nope, and then, so mine was joined together, so that is deleted.
Okay.
Yes.
So Ms. James, she is requesting to waive licensure for the superintendent/director and for the principal.
Yes, however, she also wants to remove the waiver for superintendent mentoring program
Mentoring.
rules.
She's
Because
rescinding that
saying-
request.
Correct.
Yes,
Okay. Okay, I'm clear.
Okay.
and I'll highlight that.
And the next waiver is teacher licensure. I do not have any legal issues with the citations, but the panel, of course, is welcome to ask questions.
Ms. Saraceni?
She answered how you are going to have AQT. And so that was one of my questions. The only other thing is you're going to have a licensed counselor,
Yes.
but you're going to have different pay for a teacher and a counselor.
Yes, it's completely separate. Because their duties are going to be quite extensive if we end up having the amount of special needs kids that we have. Yes. And so the licensure, the qualifications that we're requiring are much higher than what the schools are asking for, but we will have them licensed, if that makes sense.
Nope, spell it
So
out.
like my son's counselor had a bachelor's degree, went back and got his license to be a counselor. We actually want someone completely trained as a therapist/counselor to be in that position. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all we're asking for is a little clarity. Any panel members, any other questions regarding teachers? Ms. Bosch, as I read through, the teachers that you'll be hiring, you said they would be trained in RISE and that they would follow the PD rules. the professional development rules for the state, and that they would also be receiving professional development to implement the library media standards, and they would receive dyslexia training.
And that's just basic with the curriculum, because all of our basic.
So my question is, kind of talk me through what the timeline for professional development, if school were to start in July or August of 2023, when do you plan to hire teachers, get all this training done, and be ready to start school? I'm interested in the training cycle.
Yes, so the training will come with the curriculum. We'll have a week of just curriculum development, and with that is the dyslexia training. Because it's not as difficult. They're not going to be the ones that are the assessors. They're just the ones who implement the curriculum. And so with the dyslexia training or the curriculum that we're using, there are multiple methods to teach children with dyslexia, and they're just going to implement it across the board. That's just kind of how I train my kids. And when we went to the charter meeting, all of the schools implement dyslexia intervention.
Ms. Kaufman, I'm not able to hear her. Ms. Bosch, I'm not able to hear her. Okay.
Am I not on anymore? Can you hear me now?
Dean, come check our batteries.
Let me see. Does this one work?
Yeah.
I'll use this one. Okay, so our teachers will meet to do their curriculum development, and they'll go over the curriculum that they'll be using, and at that time, we will have, and we have quite an extensive list from Hillsdale and the curriculum that we use that teach them how to incorporate the different teaching styles that dyslexia teachers would use. Isolating your phonemes and all the different things, using different colors, using clay, different modes like that is what we're talking about when they'll be dyslexic trained for their curriculum. What was your other question for? Oh, the training, the timeline.
My question was about the professional development schedule to get in RISE, library media, and dyslexia.
So RISE will be started, but most likely will not be finished by the time the school starts. Depending on, we've already have 9 teachers that are already actually qualified in RISE. They have all of their qualifications. One is a teacher/media specialist, and that's what was in our original charter. She said that she would help do like a day training on the media standards and all that, but our teachers are going to handle that. And then, so the professional development, if they are not qualified in RISE, will be started, because most likely we cannot pay our teachers, for free. We can't ask them to come in for months for free to do this. So starting the middle of July, most likely a month before school starts, we will bring them in to start the professional development.
And did you factor in to pay them or to make that part of their contract?
Yes.
And then did you also factor in to pay for the professional development?
Yes.
Where is that in the budget?
That's part of the increase in the budget for the professional development, and down in, let me see if I can find it. The first year. The wrong one. I'm sorry. I have the original one. I need to find the edited one that I just sent. To Miss James. Okay, so on the expenditures, year 1, I thought we had in a line item for professional development. I need my glasses. So we have for the training and stuff for special education, we have that in there, but I am not seeing our line item for. Unless that's coming out of we have 5,000 for professional, and then 5,000 for purchase services for them to come in just for the day or two of training, but their pay itself, I believe, starts, it'll go from July 15th, and depending on how much training we need, and then we'll just end it up at the very end of school, where most classes go 2 to 4 weeks after school ends for their 12-month contract. It'll be different. Just the timing, if they want to be paid by 12 months or 9 months, depending on how they do it, yes. But they'll be coming in for their development. That'll be part of their pay. Is that what you're asking? We're not sending them anywhere. They're just going to come in and do their course review and their professional development.
My question
in-house.
was, did you budget for the cost of professional development? Bringing in a trainer?
Oh, we will have, no, because our special needs will be the one that's overseeing the dyslexia. So they're all in-house trainers, and if we have to bring in someone outside of our curriculum, that would be later on in the year. Because all of our teachers are already RISE qualified. So we would only need for professional development for the teachers to be hands-on in their dyslexia services.
Yes.
Is that what you're discussing? Or am I missing something?
No, just for clarification, if you wouldn't mind to start back and then just kind of, just for my understanding, who's
For the
gonna,
timeline?
and then who's gonna do what? Because, and I'm looking at your budget and I see that you have it broken down in different sections. I'm just trying to get a sense of
So
exactly, because you,
we have a lot of in-house training
okay.
and free services that we have already started getting through Hillsdale and the charter. My brain just flopped. We buy a lot of our curriculum through them, and it's the secular version that's in most of the classical Christian schools. They actually provide free training. So starting in July, our teachers will come in and get their professional development on the curriculum. At that time, the special needs teacher will be overseeing, like, how do we incorporate dyslexia. Now, if we have to bring someone or send someone to RISE training or give that extra training, we will do that later on and add that into their budget, yes. But
So your special your special needs teacher is going to provide training to your teachers in-house. So stepping back to your previous conversation about, it was the NID?
NILD.
NILD training. So is that included in the amount that you have set aside for your budget? Or
Yes,
is that
so
separate?
the purchase services, so hopefully, and that's not, that's travel and everything. We are not purchasing specialized special needs. Like, let's say this year we did Lexia. That's a purchase service that they gave our special needs to do at home. We are going to send our special needs teacher to Oklahoma to get the NILG training, which is 3 days. And then she'll bring back what she has learned, only to incorporate the dyslexia services for the language arts program.
So I just looked that program up online and it's quite expensive.
It's expensive, yes.
So that's where
And
I was
we-
looking into the budget going, okay, where's that money
So they
coming
have,
from?
right, they have a full course curriculum, and if you already have a specialized teacher that's already been through special ed, they actually have a more condensed program.
Because that was part of my question.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
So I was looking at your budget and then listening to what you were sharing that you're going to provide in training, and just getting a little concerned that the amounts that you have budgeted
Will not
we're
afford
not
the
covering it.
training.
And then thinking back to your previous statements that you shared that, and I guess that may have been my misunderstanding, I thought that all of your teachers were going to participate in the training that was offered through NILD.
So NILD and Fierstein do not have to be in-house, but we want to send just our special needs training to the NILD.
Right.
Fierstein.
You're going to do a training of trainers so they can come back
Yes.
and train on
Yes.
site. We got that part.
Yes.
The part we don't
Is
have,
to pay for the NILD.
for that person to attend the training, we
Yes.
don't see that in the budget.
Yeah,
And
that
so,
will come out of the special needs that we had budgeted for the purchase services.
for special
5,000.
education,
Unless we're all looking at a different budget, because I sent, no, this is the estimated year one. Is that, do you have the one that was the 200 cap?
yes.
or the 150?
I have the 150. But, I mean, it's either here or there. The
Yes.
point is,
It will be paid for out of our budget one
the
way or
point
another.
is, you said that you would provide training for your general ed teachers.
Yes, that's professional development.
Right. And you said you're going to send this sped teacher to this training to come back and train your general ed teachers. And we're trying to get an idea of how you're going to pay for it and what the timeline of that is, because it doesn't sound like it's going to happen in a very timely manner that your teachers would be prepared. And so that's what we're trying to figure out.
So professional development will start in July. I mean, I don't want to start anything too soon in case we do have the max or not the max. So the timeline starts in July, and that's when the contracts start. The training, we are going to send her, because we already have a certified and licensed special ed, we'll send her to the condensed version of NLD. Now, the Fierstein method does not have to be during that time, and that can be via Zoom, or I'll go to Israel and get it one-on-one, but either way, those are just methods that we're going to teach our teachers during language arts and dyslexia training. I mean, it's just classical education in itself already does so many methods that special needs teachers do that they don't need like years of training to teach the curriculum. I guess it's so hard without me being able to like show you. The teachers are exhausted, but they have to use every single sense all day long. And so that's why we chose this, because you don't have to do extensive training to teach these students with special needs, because you're already hitting all 5 senses. If they're visual, auditory, kinetic, whatever they are, they will be taught at the same time with the same information as all the other students. It's just hard to get other people to visualize what a classroom looks like.
I don't think it's that hard to get us to visualize, but if you're hiring teachers that are not trained, you're hiring unlicensed teachers.
Oh, we waived it, but right now we are hiring licensed teachers that are already, we're waiving it in case we do not get the full, but we already have a staff of licensed teachers. We have to waive it in case we have to bring someone else that is more qualified in teaching Latin or the language arts. Does that make sense? I mean, we cannot say that we're not going to have all fully licensed teachers because it's so specialized. But as of now, when we put out our initial feelers, we already have 10 resumes that are
Ms.
from
Walsh,
the local area.
this hearing is to get an idea of what you are doing
We
in your
are
plan.
doing that right now, but what I'm saying is, starting in July is our professional training. That's when the
I get
the
that
charter
part.
is, and we requested the licensure waiver, because what if we go through the application process and these teachers aren't qualified, and we have to pull someone that does not have a license?
That
And
made
if they need-
that made sense to us until you just came back and made a statement of, no, we're hiring licensed teachers. That's why we're all
No,
struggling.
that's why the waiver is there, in case one of these people who have applied are not qualified, so we will send them to RISE training, which is time consuming. And so they may not be fully up on RISE, but they will all be AQT.
So let me,
I
can
have-
I ask something?
Yes, please.
So it sounds like you're asking for the teacher licensure waiver as,
It's as a backup.
as a backup. So the question is, when you made your budget, as far as training, what assumption did you make with regard to the teachers you're going to hire?
For their
That
professional
they're going to be
development.
licensed or that they are not?
No, that half of them most likely, but that's in-house training. We are not sending our first teachers anywhere. So that will be part of their curriculum development the month before school starts. That's just part of their pay. So are you saying, you wanted us, because the teachers that we have discussed with, that there will be extensive training, but we're not sending them anywhere the first month and a half before
So
school.
I just think there was, the
Confusion?
the impression I got was there was some incongruence that was noticed between asking for the waiver of the licensure, but then when we talk about budget, talking about the teachers you have identified right now are licensed. And so I think we're trying to understand are we using consistent assumptions so that when we look at the budget, we can be as confident as possible that the assumptions were in alignment? I mean,
No, I
correct me if I'm
understand,
wrong.
I understand. So when we created the budget, our initial for the licensure was that we would not get any qualified teachers. They would all be AQT, but they wouldn't be licensed until we put out our initial feelers and we realized there were a lot of teachers that wanted to be licensed. But we also discussed if they are someone that will not fit the classical model and alter their teaching styles for the mission, we may have to go out and reach teachers that are not licensed. They then will be trained and sent to RISE training or whatever, the professional development. But all teachers will already know how to teach by the time school starts. Like, that's not something we're gonna have. We're not gonna hire someone just off the street that has never taught a class before. We're only asking for the licensure waiver.
Please.
It's the licensure waiver. I think it's the discrepancy between the cost of, if you're bringing in teachers that aren't certified, who do not have experiences, what does that professional development look like? And maybe the cost that you put in your budget may not be enough to satisfy that need. I think that's the question. It has really nothing to do with the licensure. We understand that.
Okay, so.
It's just that we were.
Timeline then. Within the course of a year, our teachers will have to be all fully up on RISE. So we can't expect a teacher to be hired July 15th and full up by August 15th. And so over the course of the year, they will get that. And that, because we had to be liberal with some things in our budget and not, it will be able to be moved around for that.
Are you going to utilize APSRC for that training for RISE?
Yes.
So that wouldn't be any cost to you, correct?
Correct. And that's through the website. And we've already discussed that, and same with the other training. Yes. But now NILD is costly, so that will have to be done.
What, Madam Chair?
You're recognized, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you. One of the questions I've had, I guess, is is whether you all have used APSRC as you've developed your application. I'm trying to look at the room there, and I don't see them there, even though they could be in the back row, and I just don't see them. Have they been involved in this with you, or have you done this? Okay, they're, yeah, okay. So they have been involved.
Trip Walter, staff attorney, Arkansas Public School Resource Center. I believe we had an initial meeting with Ms. Bosch's group back in January, just as we do, because apparently they reached out and had some general questions about the process. We had that discussion, but we have not been involved in the application and do not support the application.
And do they have a membership with, isn't APSRC a membership organization?
Yes,
And they haven't paid a membership or?
that is correct.
Not yet.
Ms. Saraceni?
To clarify then, if you're not a member, you would not receive those services.
We will become a member. So we had, on the initial formation of the charter, a special needs teacher from Cersei and a counselor and media specialist to actually help draft everything. And so from that, once we get this approved, all of that will come in. So we will join the APRSC and then all of the other organizations that we have to.
There was no budget for membership dues.
I thought we had,
It was in there at one time, but it's been removed.
oh, it was, wasn't it, for the second one? No, it will be paid, and we'll discuss that and change the budget, but I think when she came at the very last minute and said, what is the minimum? We were scrambling to make sure all the teachers were paid and all of the initial things would be covered. Yes. No, we will be part of that organization and our teachers will get the training.
Mr. Walter?
Thank you. Trip Walter, APSRC again. Just wanted to mention, just in general, I mean, that's an organizational decision that would have to be made if and when the request is made.
Okay. And Mr. Walters, before you walk away, I think originally, was it $1,000 in dues? That was in one of the original budgets? And membership is more or less than that?
More.
Thank you. All right, Ms. James, we're ready to move on to the next topic.
Susan James with the department. The next waiver on my list is library media. That's waivers number 4 and 5. I didn't have any issues with the citations. However, I would ask that Ms. Bosch provide some additional rationale to the panel.
And I think we already discussed how we would do that in the slideshow. We're requesting a waiver for that until we can have the full, at least 8 books per student and a larger amount of population to employ the library media specialist. But we will have a computer lab with computers and library books as we start purchasing and building up our library system. We will also be covering the standards that we have for the librarians, and one of our teachers is already a fully licensed media specialist that possibly will be employed by us. And she's been in the guidance and sending us all of the information on that.
Okay, so a potential candidate is licensed in library media?
And K through 8, or K through 6, yes.
Okay, but you're requesting the waiver just in case that's not the person you hire?
No, we want her to be a teacher. She wants to be a teacher. But to have input, what I had talked to Ms. James, we are requesting the waiver because we don't want to employ a full-time library media specialist until we have a larger population.
Okay, that's the...
Yeah.
So actually, the request is for a full-time
Media
librarian,
Media specialist.
not the, is the licensure waiver included in that, Ms. James?
I believe so. I believe they've asked for, I'm sorry, I believe they've asked for all of the standard library media waivers. And that may have been before they had a potential candidate in mind, I'm not sure.
But not to employ. She wants to be a teacher. That's why we requested the waiver for that. Trying to find it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about the library media services. So how are you going to make selection of materials, removal of materials?
So we'll follow the guidance for challenging materials as listed in the Arkansas Code, but the initial books that we use will all be part of a large canon of about 5,000 books that are recommended for classical schools. And they will be purchased annually. The first purchase will be the books that our kids will be reading, and then we will grow from there. And if you want that large list, I can send you the link of that.
So will there, and then you said there's a computer lab, so will there be electronic access to books?
Yes. Yes,
And-
we will use Destiny.
You'll use what?
Follett Destiny. So we will use that program once we get our library media set up. But we have already talked to Cabot Library, and we will be using services with them, and they said that we could rent books and go pick them up if we needed to for handheld books. And then if we need to purchase online services for books, which we have the link to all of the free classics already, so there won't be much of a cost for us to get our students books.
Any other questions about library media?
So I don't know what the cost would be, but did you build in the cost of the Cabot Library renting books to the school,
No,
to the budget?
no, it's free. All of our students will have their own library cards, and they will be able to rent it on their name.
Okay.
Yes.
Ms. James?
Stand out of the way over here so everyone can see. The next waiver on the list is gifted and talented. I don't have any issues with the citations. However, we might need a little bit additional rationale on that one.
Do you have specific questions?
So you're requesting to waive the GT program, and it said in your notes that you would have a curriculum that accelerated students. Kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
So I tried to, I mean, I went through the curriculum and I've already used a couple of years of it with my children, but so the way that the curriculum is set up, and you know that you have accelerated students, like my son is accelerated in math. He goes through all of his work, he's got 100%, and the teacher sees that he is already caught on because we do verbal testing weekly. There's a lot of interaction, you know, your multiplication tables. So he's accelerated. So she would introduce the next level, because all of our teachers will have the entire K through 12 curriculum. So not only do they know where our students started, they know the end result and the different AP classes that they could take, or possibly, you know, like we might have incorporated for our special needs Algebra 1A, Algebra 2B, whatever. They know how to accelerate them with the curriculum, and Hillsdale has it written in already. For accelerated students, they do this, they would read a different book. And so it's already built in to the core information. They would just either move on in that study instead of just writing a one paragraph. You know, it tells them exactly what to do with their accelerated students. We just won't pull them out and give them something different. They'll use the curriculum that they have.
Is the curriculum an online curriculum? Are students accessing their learning online?
No, not at all. But we will provide that. So we will give them access if we have, let's say, a COVID shutdown or something like that, yes. But Hillsdale is not online. It's all books. They will take their books home with them all the time. It's all tangible.
And the teacher resources are online, or you're purchasing those
No, we already have them.
for K-8?
K through 12. We have the teachers' manuals. The books themselves will be purchased, and that is in our budget.
Are the teachers' manuals online?
No,
They're books?
they're books. They're actual books.
And you already have those?
We already have the licensure. So they give us the teacher's manuals for the overview for K-12 and all of the books that are used, and then we'll purchase the individual subject books, if that makes sense. It's quite like the most ease I've ever seen of any curriculum, if that makes sense. So each teacher will actually have the entire K through 12 guidance, that they know where the students were and what they'll be learning the next year. So they always know how to adjust.
And then I think the wording of verbal testing was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that you're doing some formative assessment, but it's all verbal?
The majority of weekly assessments are all verbal, especially for little kids. Especially for little kids. They're not taught how to test, and so a lot of it is, like our lesson is the letter A. What are the 3 sounds of a letter A? They'll be doing that verbally. And the teacher just makes notes, and so we will still be doing annual testing that's required by the state, and quarterly and semester training testing, but for the teacher to identify the students that are not grasping the information, verbal testing is the way to do that.
I have a question about the verbal testing, Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Newton?
Assuming that some children or some families might decide to transition their children back into the Cabot Public School District, how will that translate into the curriculum? So does that help them or hurt in terms of the way public schools are traditionally teaching students?
Which would actually help because we would already know that they're not falling behind. But when they do their annual testing, they will be doing it on a computer, so they'll know how to take those tests.
Ms. Newton, they're still required to state all state summative assessments.
Well, that's what I thought. That's the reason I was thinking it might be a detriment to some students because that's what's required at the end of the year, and public school settings may be done certainly throughout the year. So that's what I was wondering if it would help or hinder, or I could see where a combination would be good, but exclusively I could see it could be a problem for some young people that I don't know if children write anymore. I don't know if they actually get a pen and pencil and write answers to questions or whatever. So, you know, being able to transition, I think it's a responsibility of one school to another to make sure that students can transition their learning from one school to the other without it just disrupting completely. That's my concern.
So we're not just verbal testing, but that's our weekly testing. And so when we do our assessments, they will be done on computers. They will not sit on computers all day long like they currently are, but they will be trained in computers just to make sure that they can do by second grade their testing.
I have to be very honest at this point, Madam Chair, and to you, Mrs. Bosch, this application seems to be not complete in terms of being able to answer. I don't know how the department feels, the staff on the department feels, but there seems to be clarifications made as we're going through the process. So we're not, but we will. So that's my concern about presenting an application to the Charter Advisory Panel, and it's anything but complete in terms of this is definitely what we'll be able to do. And so it borders on the side of whether or not it's legal, or whether it's not according to statute, or whether it's not, you know, just the best practice. And so those type of things are really, because I hear the shifting, I see the shifting, I hear the shifting between no, but we're going to, no, but we, you know, hadn't thought about that, but we will. So that's usually at this stage, applicants for charters come with, we will do this. And even with the waivers, to say, yeah, you had a question about the waiver, because that's one of the things I had noted in the waivers. And so not coming with clear answers, and I may be the only one, but I'm really, really just a little, you know, the ambiguity of it all, you know, and it might not be that for somebody else, but for me, it's not as clear as I'm comfortable with. So, you know, frankly, I don't know how I'll go forward with my, you know, my decision or whatever, because it just seems so many questions that are important questions.
And I've struggled making the slideshow to try to answer those because, you know, we looked at the curriculum and it really is based on the teacher. So we have set standards for our teachers, and they will be doing verbal testing, or they'll be doing, you know, the testing by semester and annual testing, what is required. But when I try to explain, like, it's just probably not, I mean, I was blown away the first time I was introduced to classical education, and yet when I gave my children standardized testing in 4th grade, my daughter was PHS, and I didn't even know what that meant, and it was post-high school because she aced it. But yet all I did was a strong language arts program with a math, and then I read everything else, and that's how classical is. And so when we try to describe how the day is going to look, or what is this group style learning, or will the teachers be trained, it's so involved with this open communication and community style that it's hard to say, like, my teachers will do this, because it's like a kindergarten teacher is completely different from a 6th grade teacher, but it still looks very different from a traditional classroom.
Well, this disclaimer, the disclaimer that I issued earlier when I spoke, I think this panel, and by the looks of the panel, or the makeup of the panel, we do a lot of different things. You know, Mr. Baldwin is CPA. I'm into the social work aspect of it. Some are into education. But I think it's a responsibility, the applicant's responsibility, to make sure everyone understands. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the issues of I've written a couple of them down that I'm still concerned about: is segregation of duties, chain of command, the comments Mrs. Green made about the issues around special ed and whether the regulations are are met, and food service, just a variety of financial, I can't even read my own notes, but those financial issues and those academic issues, I look to this meeting to be the place where all of it is laid out very clearly how it's gonna be. Or if it's not clear, then we respond to how we feel. But I'm not convinced, or I'm not persuaded that all of this answers my questions. And that may be totally different from the other panel members, but I'm more confused now. I made a lot of notes going into this, and most of them have been addressed, but I'm not clear, just personally, and it may be just me having a problem understanding, but I'm not clear how this charter will operate as it relates to finances, as it relates to education, as it relates to special education, as it relates to IEPs and following IEPs and the whole gamut. So that's my angst at this point. So I just want to let you know, and it may not be, maybe like I say, I'm not an educator. So it may be just my problem, but this is the first time I've been this, I'm not gonna say confused, but something else. I'm not, I just don't understand. I can't follow the continuum. And that's the word. I can't follow the continuum.
I totally understand. And as we presented, having a completely inclusive classroom and not have contained classrooms, that was completely branched out of our own local school not following ESSA and violating the law and IDEA.
No,
so it's hard to explain
at this point. So I'm not going to say I'm not concerned about what the cabinet is doing what they're supposed to do. But if we have the responsibility of approving a charter application, we have to look at what you're presenting now, not as it compares to someone else. And again, I don't see the continuum of the, going from one phase to going from, how many students you're going to have, where they're going to be, how they're going to be transported, how they're going to be fed, how are they going to be developing IEPs, how the class size is going to look. So I think even though there may be some deficits or some questions still remaining about some things, the continuum to me is jagged and not connected.
Well,
I'm not being able to,
yes.
The puzzle pieces, there's some puzzle pieces missing. And it may be the face, it may be the brain of the person that's on there, it may be a curriculum, but some key, and I don't know if you agree or not, I don't know what the department staff agrees, but to me, as a panel member, I'm confused about what fits together and what doesn't. And at the end of the conversation, actually, whether or not the questions have been answered. And like I said, it may be me, but that's my concern.
No, and I totally understand it. Thank you.
Mr. Baldwin?
Yes, I want to follow up on Ms. Newton's comment. And, one of the things I've always valued about the charter panel is I see us as those that are trying to be helpful. You all put a lot of work into this. It's clear that you have a heart for the children and that you're trying to do something unique and different. And that's always, when you're doing something unique and different, there's always more questions than when it's something that we're used to seeing. When I read the application, I liked the focus on literacy and math. I thought that was good. And so I think there are, I think you all have made a strong effort. But I think I do agree with Ms. Newton that I am, and I'll just say I am confused on exactly what we would vote on right now. I think there's some more work to do with the application. And one of the things that I was thinking really throughout this whole meeting was the value of APSRC in helping you walk through the application and maybe fill in some of these blanks that we have. And that might be an option to go back with them and do a little bit more work and come back to us. And this is just my personal thought. That might be helpful as you proceed. I don't know if you want to do that or not, but they are very experienced at this, and they can help applicants, present a completed product, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Davis, see if he's still on.
I am here. Yes, I would agree. I've been very quiet this meeting. Some of you know I'm kind of in transit, and I do want to say that I agree wholeheartedly with my colleagues on the panel. One, I appreciate, as Mr. Baldwin just talked about, the sincere interest in an attempt to getting students what they need. I know that is not an easy task, and you know, the requirements of the charter panel and ADE are quite a lift. But of course, it's a necessary lift. It is one that is focused on getting the best for all students in the state of Arkansas. And therefore, it is important that we have a certain amount of clarity in regards to the application and the procedures for all students. And so I would agree with my colleagues, Mr. Baldwin and Ms. Newton, in regards to this application. There is clearly been a tremendous amount of time, but there are still a couple of missing components to the application process that I think would be very important to get answers to and get some clarity on. And I'll stop there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you for that.
Mr. Zellner?
So I'll just say, I can agree with Ms. Newton. Her verbalization that it seemed like there was a lack of a continuum. The way I felt when I read the application and as we've gone through this is, and I could be wrong, but this feels like a lot of work was put into it, but it was rushed. So yeah, there's a lot of connecting the dots that still haven't happened. And just quite frankly, I'll go back, as I would need more from a budgeting standpoint before I could become comfortable with this.
Ms. Wright McMurray?
So to reflect back on some comments that Mr. Baldwin made, is that part of our role definitely is to, determine the best applications to move forward to the board for them to be able to review. But also, because of the knowledge that we have, we can share that and provide opportunities for you to have a better understanding of how to implement good models. And so hopefully conversations today will help with that process going forward. And with Ms. Newton, I did have a list of questions. Quite a few of them have been answered, but there's still some that are still out there. One being looking at you offering on a graduated model the 38 required courses, and I may have missed. I didn't see where career education was included in that, and so to me, that's a bit of a challenge, especially when we're looking at you're utilizing the college prep model. And part of preparing students to go to the next level is helping them to understand those career pathways that can help them go to the next level. And that's one of the reasons why career education is a part of that process. And so whatever's decided here today and whatever path you decide to go forward, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to respective departments that are within ADE on the Division of Elementary Secondary Education side and on the career technical education side. So if you do have an opportunity to come back or look at how you restructure, you utilize those resources to help you to better understand what is needed to be implemented in, so then that can help you to have a lot of your questions already resolved before you come back for further conversations.
Well, and that's why they weren't included in the application, like the career, we asked a waiver for that, because the way that liberal arts is you don't have the career focused, because they get a sampling of all of that. That's a very huge issue in classical.
And I do understand that, but and like I said, unless I'm not misunderstanding what you indicated, is that your goal is to offer the required 38.
Well, the 38 do not include for engineering, for like the career that is listed. That's a whole nother 4 extra classes. So the 38 is required with the AP courses.
but there was a whole nother class, like you have to take 3 classes in conjunction to be career focused, correct?
You have to offer a career and technical education. It's a requirement of public schools.
Right, so the 38 are part of that, but we would not be like, okay, so like Cabot, they're huge innovation, the School of Innovation, they're like, you want to be a nurse? This is the pathway that you have to take once you start here first. We are offering, as a liberal arts education, the broad band where it's not, you have to say you're taking this career focused.
But, so again, I understand that, but when you state that you're going to offer the required 38 as a part of the required 38 is career education, and you don't have to offer all programs of study.
Right.
You select
Right,
a
so they're
pathway,
offered, but
and
we don't highlight certain career paths because they're all going to take the set course. Yes.
So,
Ms. Saraceni?
To say that I agree with all of my board members. There's questions, there are concerns, but I think that after today you can come back with more in-depth explanations in the future, and because there are some gaps that I take my position on this board serious, because we're educating children, and that's why we're here. And so I just want to say that even though I can tell you took time, effort, and you're very passionate about this classical curriculum, and I understand that, there's just some questions. So thank you for presenting today.
Panel members, I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair,
I would move,
go ahead, Phil. I'm sorry.
thank you, Toyce. I would move that we table the application and turn it back over to the Omni Classical Prep of Cabot Group to do some more work. And I would encourage you all to do that work and to get, I guess this is more than a motion, but I would encourage you all to do that work and to return to us with a revised application.
I second that motion.
Okay, there has been a motion by Mr. Baldwin to table. Okay, Ms. James?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't jump up here more quickly. Let me. Please, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, you're fine.
Okay. So the panel has 3 options as far as voting. Approve or deny, which is the decision. Take the matter under advisement till a future scheduled meeting, which that is essentially what tabling this would be. If there were one little thing we were waiting on, that's an example of when the panel might want to table. But the third option is defer the vote to approve or disapprove a charter application renewal or request in order to allow the public charter school or applicant to make modifications or receive technical assistance to correct deficiencies in the application renewal or request. I think that's what the motion would be, but I would advise the panel when on that, just to consider how much work is going to be involved in this and kind of the timeline.
It sounds to me like my tabling would be your option 3. Would you agree that probably is what we're looking at here?
Are you saying that you would like to amend your motion to defer the vote until the applicant has some additional time to work on the application?
I think that's what I'm saying,
Okay.
if that makes sense, yes.
Okay.
Point of clarification.
Mr. Davis?
If we were to deny the application, does that prevent someone from coming back again with the application after it has been amended? Or help me understand the difference between what I think what Mr. Baldwin would like to do and a full denial.
If the panel votes to deny the application, then the applicant could come back at a later time, but at this point, it would have to be next cycle. So I think the thing to consider is how much work and how much additional is going to be needed. But I believe we have a motion on the table
Right.
right now.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Baldwin and a second by Ms. Newton to table the action on Omni Classical Prep of Cabot. All those in...
Actually, Madam Chair, could I withdraw my second?
Yes, ma'am. Can
Okay,
she
I
withdraw her
withdraw.
second, Attorney?
Yes.
All right. I have a motion by Mr. Baldwin to table the action on Omni Classical Prep. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Baldwin and a second by Mr. Zellner to table the action on Omni Classical Prep of Cabot. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I have two. Those opposed?
Aye.
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 Ms. Saraceni?
Aye.
Motion fails.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Davis?
I'd like to make a motion that we deny the application and require the presenter to come back next cycle once all work has been completed.
Well, we can't require him to come back.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion that we deny the application.
Okay. A motion by Mr. Davis, a second
Second.
by Ms. Saraceni to deny the application. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Two opposed. Her and Baldwin. And Mr. Davis, were you on the approve of you were on the denial?
That's correct.
Okay. So Mr. Davis, Saraceni, Pat McMurray, make sure I got my list right, and Ms. Newton voted for the motion to deny, and Mr. Zellner and Mr. Baldwin voted in opposition. Motion passes. So Omni Classical Prep of Cabot has been denied the application, and panel members will need to write into their voting sheets, and we'll go around and give reasons for that. Ms. Bosch, I want to thank you for your presentation, and just know that we need quality schools, and you've got a lot of great qualities that you've identified, but I think as Mr. Zellner said, the connections are not all hooked together. And so it gives you time and gives you feedback on the plan to see how you might want to move forward.
And so the cycles are still annual, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so the same timing for next year?
Yes, but you could
Correct.
start now. Getting all of your stuff put together.
Right. Thank you so much for your input.
Thank you. Panel members, when you're ready.
I'm ready. I have a problem accessing my voting sheet. I'll do that later. You can record. But I voted in favor of the motion because I think there are many questions that impact education and fiscal matters and that were not answered. And the continuity of the application is the lack of continuity of the application is the reason I'm voting for the motion. I'm sorry.
Ms. Newton. Mr. Davis.
Yes, I am going to vote for the motion. And based on the lack of clarity regarding administrative roles, fiscal guardrails and responsibility, and concerns regarding special ed student services.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Baldwin?
Yes, so I'm saying that I voted to table the application since I consider this an appropriate incremental action in developing a complete application. I voted against the motion since I do not see that as an incremental action, but I do agree that the application needs more clarity.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Zellner?
I did not support the denial as I felt the amount of work already done on the application was significant and warranted allowance of the applicant to cure the issues prior to the next cycle.
Ms. Saraceni?
Support the denial based on the fact that they need to bring back a more detailed plan to fully address all concerns.
Ms. Wright McMurray?
Although I agree with the need to ensure students with special needs have access to high quality and equitable education, the application submitted on behalf of the Omni School needs substantial work to provide clear explanation of financial, administrative, and educational structure. I encourage the applicants to follow up with ADE and APRC to have additional resources.
Thank you. All right, panel members, that's the end of our agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.